So does anybody else feel like subtitles have gotten really crap lately? Or is it just me? Hey there, folks. This is this is one that is basically springboarding off a tweet because there was something I saw on Twitter. I quote tweeted it with my own thoughts, and it got a lot more traction than I expected. And I'm not, as a rule, I don't take Twitter as a gauge for a topic that I should talk about. But the traction it got made me realize, oh, this actually might be something worth talking more about. Partially because of the traction it got, partly because of the discourse I saw off the back of it. I want to talk about subtitles, specifically on streaming platforms, specifically about the fact that they have gotten pretty garbage of late. Now, this whole thing spawned off of this tweet and this screen grab that someone else got where it's just flatly wrong what is being said by that character. Now, if you don't know what that's from, that is from the Doctor Who episode Power of the Doctor. And that in the US is streaming on Max. In the UK, you see it on BBC iPlayer. Now, the actual line that he says was, "I erased you, Doctor." But what the subtitle says is, "I raised your daughter." Why did that happen? Why are these subtitles so garbage? Short answer, it's AI, but actually getting into the bigger question of why are they using AI to do this at all is one worth exploring, because I think there's a little bit more nuance to it than I was seeing in the discourse that spun off of my quote tweet of that. Not that I should expect especially deep discourse or nuance on Twitter. I should know better, but still. I think there's some interesting stuff to cover as to why this is happening. But let's be very clear. This is obviously AI. And part of the reason I know it's AI is because that screen grab, and I did check my own account on Max and brought that up again and watched it to see if I could recreate the error. I did. I got the exact same subtitling. Now, I had my friend Stuart Hardy, aka Stu Bagful, check the BBC iPlayer version over in the UK. That one is captioned correctly. So this is something specific to Max, which means Max is making use of AI to generate its captions. BBC iPlayer is not. Let's kind of explore this, because first of all, let me be clear. The notion of AI captioning does have some merit. Now, I've been real down on AI. And I hate even using the term. It's not actual intelligence, but look, that's colloquially how we talk about this stuff, so that's what I'm going to say. I know it's not actually properly AI, but look, this is just how it's being talked about, so go with me on this. But large language models, AI, I've come down pretty hard on that stuff, especially generative AI, anything that creates music, video, imagery. I have a lot of problems with that stuff, but the ultimate core thing is that it is built off of theft. They scrape massive amounts of data that they do not have the rights to and have not gotten permission to use in order to create these things. I did a whole other video talking about that, so I won't dwell on that point now. But for all the problems that I have with a lot of the ways that this AI is being used, especially in a way that both steals from and then attempts to replace artists, actors, musicians, coders, all sorts of stuff. With subtitles, there is some use cases that I think are not only defendable, but actually good thing. I admittedly rely on AI to do the captioning here on YouTube, because in that video that I talked about AI being theft, the main thing that was at the backbone of that was that AI had been, AI companies have been scraping YouTube for data, but they've been scraping the subtitle data, not to the closed caption data, which is auto-generated by YouTube. But you have the ability to input proper subtitles that you put in exactly what was said and you time it properly to the point at which it should appear, have it end at the right point, etc. Almost none of my videos have proper subtitles. I think maybe 2 of them do. So I actually wasn't even caught up in that YouTube thing. My data wasn't scraped as so far as I could find, but there is a use for me for people who need closed captioning or need subtitles that I do rely on the auto-generated ones, because I have neither the time to personally do subtitling, nor do I have the means to afford to pay somebody else to do it, even in the instances where I had a full and proper script, which is not often. Spoiler, peek behind the curtain, I don't fully script most of what I do. But even the times that I do, that is just time that I don't have. So I do rely on the closed and the closed captioning on YouTube serves me pretty well. Now, part of that is because I am an English speaker who does not have a particularly strong accent, and because I was a theater kid, I enunciate pretty well. So my voice and the way that I speak, as long as I don't mumble, I am pretty well served by the auto captioning. What's interesting about what I saw on Max with that line from Sacha Dhawan, while Sacha Dhawan does not have a particularly thick accent, he does whisper that line, which I bet you is part of what threw that model off. But like, regardless, there is a use for something like YouTube, or honestly, a lot of live events. So if you are on the younger side, you may or may not be aware of this at all. I don't know how much the younger generation like watches TV as opposed to streaming, but when I was in my 20s, so long ago, so 2 decades ago, I was working at a bar, and technically I was working in 3 bars. There was the leather bar upstairs, which I helped set up for the start of the night, but I didn't normally work. Then there was downstairs, which had the dance club, and then there was a sort of the lounge area, which had a pool table and sometimes did karaoke and stuff like that. This whole thing was a gay bar. I got tipped very well while I was working there. Can't imagine why. Probably got tipped better then than I would now, looking like this. But anyways, in the lounge area, they would sometimes have sports on the TV. Now, it wasn't a sports bar, so they usually wouldn't have the sound on, but they'd have the closed captioning on. And if you've ever watched closed captioning for live events from back then, because I don't know if closed captioning for live events has adopted AI, which works faster, because back then they had to pay people to basically type this stuff out as they heard it so it would appear up. And they did a pretty good job, but it was usually 30 seconds to a minute behind of what was being said. If it was anything that wasn't scripted that they could queue up proper captions for ahead of time. Anything that was live, that stuff was running behind by a bit. And so again, AI, which can work a lot faster, that has a use case for that. So I don't want to disparage as a complete blanket thing the idea of using AI to do captions or subtitles at all. There are definitely cases where it makes sense and is useful, and I would say is one of the more defensible uses of AI, again, especially on a platform like YouTube. Because compared to other stuff that I'm going to talk about where somebody has a job that's getting replaced, currently, speaking for me at least, nobody would get replaced by me relying on the auto captioning because I can't afford to hire those people in the first place. So, I do want to admit a few cases where some degree of AI can make sense. But when you're talking about something like Power of the Doctor and Doctor Who or any number of other things, that has a script. You don't need to guess. You don't need to rely on an algorithm to listen to it and do its best guess. You know what was said. It was scripted. You can get a transcript. Heck, the fact that the BBC has correct captioning means that captioning data that is correct exists. Why aren't you just using that, if nothing else? Because this result is absurd. Anyone who actually is relying on the closed captioning, they think they just saw a massive twist that doesn't actually exist in the show. and will go completely unacknowledged, which granted wouldn't make it that much different from a lot of the twists that happened during the Chris Chibnall era of Doctor Who. But let's set all that aside, because that's definitely its own full tangent. But anyways, the correct information exists. What the hell? And like, I have been noticing this. It was really helpful to start solidifying my thoughts to see that crystallized instance from Power of the Doctor. But I have been noticing this because I have ADHD. And one of the things that I do to try and help focus my brain a bit, or help, bring it back when I'm watching something, is I will often have the subtitles on. Not necessarily watching them the whole time, but like, one of the many aspects of my particular flavor of ADHD, because it's not the same for everybody, is I have a hard time narrowing down to a specific sound source. And it really does seem lately, especially with shows, that like the sound mix has gotten really bad. And again, it's probably exacerbated for me because I'm having a hard time getting my brain to zero in on just dialogue versus the sound design, the mix, the ambient music, whatever else. And there are times that I'll have a hard time parsing dialogue, or there are other times where just my brain will start to wander and I'll zero in on the subtitles as a way to try and bring my focus back by engaging more of my brain, by making myself read as well as watch and listen. It is, for me, a tool that is not designed to help with my neurodivergence, but does. And I have been noticing some oddness now and then. Also, tiny side tangent. I have also noticed that the standard for caption, if you pick English captions, what you get isn't just English subtitles, it's English closed captioning for the hearing impaired, which means it also says, loud noise, bang, or describes the tone of the music, tense music, melancholy music, sad music, happy music, etc., etc. And while I don't have a problem with that being there, speaking as someone who only needs it for the dialogue, like, is there a reason we can't have an option for English subtitles and then a separate option for English with closed captioning? It is possible to find instances where both are offered, like on some physical media or some stuff, but it's pretty rare. I had to check that because in my head, like, they used to have the option for both. I actually went back and checked a whole bunch of DVD menus. They actually don't. What used to be the case is they just didn't offer closed captioning for the hearing impaired on a lot of subtitles at all. The default was just English subtitles, full stop. And so while I will grant, if we're only going to have one, it is better to have it with the closed captioning because that's an accessibility feature and I can suck it up. But, could we have both? That'd be nice. Anyways, tangent over. So yeah, this is obviously AI generated. Why are they doing this? Like, especially because it's demonstrably worse. You have the data to do it correctly. You have the transcript, or at least you can get it. You licensed this whole show. You must be able to get the script so that you can actually do this. Even if the BBC isn't going to just send you the full subtitle data, or if you need to switch it to a different system or do it from scratch because whatever systems you're using are not compatible or some tech nonsense, I don't know. But like, you can get what you need to do it properly. And you used to do it properly. But now you're doing AI, which can result in just wrong information. Why? Now, part of the reason I want to talk about this is because the main thing that was assumed by a lot of the people in the conversation on my quote tweet was that, oh, this saves them money because they don't have to pay somebody to do it properly. And maybe, like, let's be clear, it would have otherwise been somebody's job to sit down and take the transcript or even if they were just given the subtitle data, upload it, make sure it's there, go through the whole thing, make sure it's timed correctly, and make sure it's lining up with the correct points and everything else. You do have to check it. That does take time, and you have to pay somebody to do that job. But the idea that AI is cheaper than that, I definitely want to interrogate that. Now, I can't prove whether or not it is cheaper because I don't know how much, say, Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns Max, is paying for the license to whatever large language model they're using. But it's going to be a significant amount of money. I can almost guarantee you that. I don't know what it would be, and it may or may not total more than what it cost them to hire however many people they would have properly subtitling stuff manually. But it's not necessarily, actually, I can pretty much guarantee it is not strictly a matter of this costs us less than that. Because I'm not convinced it does. Well, it kind of probably depends on how you parse it, because I'm going to get into the real reason why this is being pushed into these spaces. And it's because it's not only being used for the subtitles. The thing about AI right now is it is, in theory, multi-purpose and multi-use. And both the companies that are developing it and the companies that are sinking money into licensing these things want to get as much use out of it as possible, the most bang for their buck. So what that means from the perspective of someone like Warner Brothers Discovery, who, so far as I know, are not developing their own AI. They would just be licensing it from somebody else. But like licensing that stuff for a large scale business is very expensive. And the more uses you get out of it, the easier it is to try and justify the expense. So I feel relatively confident saying that strictly on the topic of the subtitles, they are probably spending more money on the AI than they would be on whatever people the AI has replaced. However, that's not the only thing the AI is getting used for. They're using AI and things associated with that to help with the recommendation algorithms and who knows what else a major studio like Warner Brothers Discovery is using or wants to use or is trying to use it for. But as many uses as possible helps justify the expense. And that is the real reason it's here. Not because it's better. It's demonstrably not. But it will justify the expense paid. And that is more important than it being better than what it replaces. It is important that the expense, that whatever CEO or executive level person signed off on to acquire and make use of this AI, they need to justify that expense. Because if they don't, it's their ass. I can make a pretty direct comparison to the day job that I used to have before I was able to do this full time. Shout out to my Patreon. Thank you so much. I am now 4 years into doing this as my full-time job, and I cannot thank you enough. Anybody who is able to contribute, that is a massive help. I'm experimenting with putting the plug other places than the very end. But when I had the day job, I was working in sales and customer service. Now, I'm not going to name the company, but really the only things you need to know is I was in sales and customer service, and it was a company that made physical goods. So, we weren't selling tech or software or concepts or whatever. We were selling physical stuff that could be bought and sold. So when I was there for a couple of years, the heads of sales and customer service, they got approval to spend, I don't know how much, but I know it was a lot, especially for the size of the company, a lot of money on a new CRM, customer resource management system. And they got on all of our asses to use it for everything. Now, the first thing is we didn't necessarily need it. Like, I'm not going to say there was no reason to replace the existing CRM system that we had. It was a little outdated, but it did the job. And more to the point, it's what everybody was used to, and it's what all the data was in. Data that would not cleanly transfer over to the new system. So much stuff had to be entered in manually, and that not only was a massive time sink, but for this thing to have any proper value, the whole company needed to be using it. And here's the thing, manufacturing and logistics, those departments were real resistant to use this thing for anything other than the bare bones of what they needed it for. Because most of the fancier features of this thing, the reasons that it was probably really expensive, they had no use for. And the heads of those departments weren't going to push for the use of it. They didn't sign off on the expense, but the heads of sales and customer service did. So not only did they push us to adopt and get used to this new system, they pushed us to use it for everything. Log all your calls, log all your emails, put in your plan, your presentations. Now, admittedly, some of this was to monitor our work, which managers love to do and is actually not helpful for most jobs, but that could be a whole other conversation. But I honestly don't think that was the point. That was a side effect of them needing us to utilize as many of the features, even if it was stuff that we did not find helpful. They wanted us to utilize as many of the features as possible because it became our job to justify the expense that they signed off on. And I think AI is going through a lot of the same things with a lot of these companies, because AI, for all the problems I have with it, it does have a heck of a lot more potential. Some of it horrifying and unethical potential, but it does have a lot more potential than the last couple of tech fads, those being crypto and NFTs. You know, most companies over the last decade or so, many of them, kind of dipped their toes into NFTs or into crypto a little bit, and then quietly dropped those as features of whatever it was that they were doing. So many companies did that because there isn't actually a use and there isn't actually a market for this. AI is a little bit different in that you can get something more tangible out of it, even if not everyone buys into it. Because that's the core problem with NFT and crypto. Unless it is mass adopted, it is useless. AI, as long as it is fed massive amounts of stolen data, it is useful and will make something. But again, it is very expensive. And I suspect that a lot of these companies have sunk a lot of money, possibly just licensing, possibly investment money into the companies developing this stuff in the first place. I have heard that frickin' Taco Bell CEO has said they want to be an AI first company. Taco Bell? Now, they're probably just jumping on it because it's a buzzword, but maybe they've also sunk money into it. I don't know. You can kind of tell by their actions what kind of companies have actually sunk so much money into this. To go back to NFTs and the blockchain, Square Enix, which is a video game company, even after the bubble burst on this stuff and it started tanking, they still tried to push it. And I strongly suspect, as do a number of other people, that it was probably because they were heavily invested in it. So they weren't prepared to just walk away from it because of how much money they sunk into it. That is a factor with AI. There is, of course, as I said, potential practical use for it. I did talk in my previous video why I don't think generative AI artistic works are actually going to succeed in the long run, but they are going to be disruptive for a time up until the point where it kind of falls apart. So they are still a problem in and of themselves. But the simple thing is there is no reason for AI to be showing up in something like the subtitles. There's no use for this. As I said, it is clearly, evidence-based, clearly worse. It's just worse, but they're doing it anyway. They're doing it to justify the expense. Part of what's really frustrating about it being shoved into something like subtitles is what the hell are we supposed to do about it? Because as infuriating as I find AI, if it's not being used in the actual creation of the piece of art, I don't feel like AI is something that I want to boycott a movie or a TV show over, especially when it comes down to the frickin' streaming platforms are the jackasses who did that, and none of the people involved in making it are responsible for this. But also just think about, what if I did put my foot down and go, you use AI generated subtitles? I won't watch you anymore. Well, what am I supposed to do? Because of the way that these licenses work, I can't take my money elsewhere. If HBO Max's subtitles on Doctor Who, the episode The Power of the Doctor, suck, I can't watch it on a different platform that doesn't have AI subtitles. Not without, a VPN and jumping through some hoops. But the point is, I can't just kind of move somewhere else and take my money elsewhere, because this is where that episode of Doctor Who is currently. Doctor Who is a weird example because Max has the broadcast rights for the 2005 to 2022 episodes. Disney is running the 2023 going forward episodes. Classic is both on Tubi and on BritBox. Like, it is kind of spread out across the place. But for this era of Doctor Who that is still under license to Max, if I want to watch it, this is the only place I can go. So what am I supposed to do about the fact that the subtitles suck? I can't do anything. Like, the capitalist solution is supposed to be take your money elsewhere. It's like, yeah, but I don't want to not see Doctor Who. It's not Doctor Who's fault. And in a retail situation, if we were to take streaming as analogous to a chain of stores, if we treat Max as, Walmart, and I don't like what Walmart's doing, I can go, cool, I won't buy this from Walmart. I'm going to go to Best Buy or something else. Like, I could go somewhere else with my money to get the same thing, so I don't have to benefit the platform, which is the problem, as opposed to the product, because the product's not at fault. I can't do that with streaming. That makes it a very low-risk thing for them to shove AI as a use in something like subtitles, because people aren't going to bail on them over it, despite the fact that it is worse. No matter what you think about anything else I'm saying, that is not up for debate. It's clearly worse. It hears this stuff, it puts up what it thinks the words are, but we know what the words are. And if you just paid a human being to get those subtitles uploaded and time them out properly manually, it would be fine. We know this is worse. But the fact that it's worse is not a thing that is going to get most people to just stop watching on Max and abandon the platform. This is almost the ideal kind of use for AI from an executive or CEO's perspective, because it justifies the expense of the thing that they have either invested in, have licensed, whatever it may be. And it also, even if it sucks, which it does, they're not going to lose customers over that alone. Like, realistically, they're not. They are going to shove this in wherever they can that is going to have this kind of minimal risk to them, even when it makes a thing worse. And it will make it worse. It will just keep making everything worse by increments and degrees, because it's not something that's it's not the straw that broke the camel's back for most people, but it helps them justify their expense, because they'll never just admit, oh, this sucks and we shouldn't have invested in it. You will never get an executive to admit that they screwed up and put money into something they shouldn't have. The only time you will ever get any of them to admit that is while they are on their way out on a golden parachute. Maybe they'll admit a tiny bit of fault. Probably not even then, though. They'll just get a job high ranking at some other company and then screw that one up. Executives really, dial in the anti-capitalist. Capitalism is the problem. It is, but I'm going to try and dial it in on this one. So what are we supposed to do? I don't know. Other than just make a really big stink about it, I think the best case scenario we could hope for with this kind of use for AI is to just hammer on it. But I don't think people are passionate enough about it to do that. Again, to look to video games for a comparison, you look at something like microtransactions in, full price video games, which used to be 60 and 70 is becoming frustratingly common now. But you look at microtransactions in full price games, that used to be a massive thing. Like, people would complain left or right every time it happened, but they kept putting it in and people got tired of having to complain about it and they gave up. Now, do we still get some stuff that doesn't have it? Yes. And the video games that come out that don't have that will brag about that. It'll become a selling point. Oh, don't worry, we don't do that. And I suspect stuff like AI for this kind of absurd use will, for some companies, be a selling point. Oh, we don't use AI for this stuff where it just makes it all worse. And like, that'll be nice, but the big corporations won't have a reason to stop using this, because I don't think people are going to be willing to keep complaining about it. Because as I said, I'm not going to stop watching Max because of this, as infuriating as I find it, just on premise and principle. And just for a point of comparison, while I am zeroing in on the Power of the Doctor example, that's far from the only one I've seen. I'll cite you another specific example that unfortunately I don't have screenshots for. So I was commissioned a little bit ago to take a look at the first 11 episodes of an anime called 86. It's quite good. My review is up in the break room of Geeks, my secondary channel. I watched that on Crunchyroll. Now, I watched that during a 7-day free trial of Crunchyroll, which I canceled immediately after having seen the episodes. And at the time that I did that, I didn't realize I was going to do this topic. So I didn't record any of this, but the subtitles on that one were a disaster, because that is a show with a lot of not English names. And I don't just mean like Japanese names. So like the main female character is a Major Millier. It's been a couple of weeks now and I have a bad memory for names, so I might be getting, but it's something like that. And I swear I had the subtitles up for that, despite the fact that I was watching it with the dub for the reason I talked about before, my ADHD. So I had the subtitles up, and I swear every single time her name was said, it gave me something different, and it was never, ever right. And again, I know that you have the ability to get a transcript because you've got the dub. It has been properly translated into English in a clear format for the dub. So why are you not using whatever work was done for that to create the subtitles? You're using AI that is baffled by the words and the names in this futuristic sci-fi setting, as most AIs would be. But it's there because somebody needs to justify the expense. I'm not necessarily saying that Crunchyroll needs to justify the expense. Reminder, Crunchyroll is owned by Sony. Sony's probably the one who has to justify the expense and is insisting that subsidiaries use this damn thing. But regardless, we're going to keep seeing this until we get AI rooted out of places where it doesn't help. And again, AI specifically with subtitles does have some uses, but not this. This is just trash. And I don't know how long we're going to have to put up with it. If AI properly tanks, and I hope it does, but if it properly tanks, and like I said before, I don't think it'll succeed in taking over artistic jobs ultimately, but that doesn't mean it'll go away fully. But that's the kind of stuff that will generate the most actual revenue for these major companies. But if that aspect of it junks, we'll probably stop seeing it in subtitles as well, because if they realize that it's not worth it for them to use it for art, music, scripts, video creation, etc., then they're not going to keep it around just to keep using it for the subtitles. They'll drop the whole thing and go back to the way things were. And that's what I hope will happen. How long will that take? I don't know. Too long. But I just found it interesting to get into the real depths, really get into the weeds of why this happens. Because yes, the problem is AI. Yes, it is about money, but it's not the strict one-to-one, oh, we don't have to pay a person to do the subtitling. Like, yeah, that's true, but that's definitely not the whole picture. And I find the whole picture a lot more interesting to talk about because it's corporate buffoonery. And as infuriating as I find corporate buffoonery, I do find it cathartic intermittently to talk it through and just point at the idiocy that is going on and the absolute clusterfuck That is late stage capitalism and the insistence, especially by anything associated with the tech industry, to push whatever they think is the next big thing. And they're clinging to AI for dear life because blockchain tanked, NFTs tanked, the metaverse tanked. This hasn't tanked. And I think the decline on this is going to be slower, so they're going to hold on to this thing for dear life until they think of the next thing that could potentially make them a lot of money and probably contribute to the destruction of the planet. Because let's not forget the massive energy consumption that AI represents. Fuck capitalism. Sorry. I said I was going to dial it back. At a certain point, it has to be said. But what are your thoughts on any of this? Do you have any examples of really absurd captioning from the last year or two? Anything like that, or whatever thoughts you have on everything that I've talked about, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Patreon I already plugged. There's a link in the description for that too, as well as other stuff that I do round about the internet. But don't worry too much about that. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melinda Pedersen, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Gene Foray, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Frenobulax the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperel, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Adam R. D.L. Taylor, Palba Rabajoggle, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. If you're wondering about this little guy, this is Nymph. He's new. Don't worry, the other two are fine. He's just not fully socialized with them yet. You'll see them all together soon. Won't they? Yes, they will.